This is the second video in a 5-part series that I will be doing on Steampunk Trump and the apocalypse. This one's called The Time Machine, so it involves the time machine that I painted behind President Trump, where he's coming out of a portal. And this is about that time machine. So I'm going to go on and read what I wrote. Something we are all learning is that this war is a spiritual one. It is literally good against evil in a battle for our souls. The war hasn't just been going on behind the scenes for 10 or 20 years. It's been in motion for centuries. There are bound to be hidden technologies and secret societies set up to spread disinformation. Finding the truth throughout the spaces of time that have been manipulated would certainly instigate the need for such time travel technologies to be used. In the painting, Steampunk Trump and the Apocalypse, I painted the steampunk version of a Stargate, complete with lots of gears, and made from the mass treasures of gold from the future. The reflection of presidents past that have been aware of this battle, who stepped up to the game and did their part to get us to where we are now, gaze at all that is happening through mirror images in the major gears. On a side note, there were so many things that just came to mind, and I excitedly added them to the painting without question. I love to work in this fashion. Personally, I think that God gives all artists an opportunity to show them things that they may not have seen if they would have relied on their own research. I'm going to start with President George Washington. President George Washington, founder of our country. Notably the first that came to mind. My eyes lit up and my heart melted when I heard this story. In the winter of 1777, the Continental Army had suffered defeats in the battles of Brandywine and Germantown. The Brits occupied the capital at the time, which was located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Winter was on its way, a brutal one at that. Food and clothing were scarce, and Washington had lost nearly 3,000 men to hardship. Trails of blood stained the snow as many soldiers had no shoes and had wrapped their feet in rags. Amputations were common, and morale was low. The British could have destroyed us, but in a twist of fate, decided to wait to attack until spring. George Washington settled his troops at Valley Forge. On October 17th, 1777, George slipped away from the troops to find a quiet place to pray, something this president was well known for. He specifically requested time alone and that no one bothered him. When a singularly beautiful woman appeared, you can imagine his perplexity. He had given strict orders not to be disturbed. 4 times, Washington found the resolve to ask her why she was there. There was no answer, only the raising of eyebrows. The room filled with sensations and became luminous. Poor George thought he might be dying. Instead, he heard the voice say to him, "Son of the Republic, look and learn," as she extended her arm eastwardly. The first peril, this is about the first peril that she spoke about. In a faraway rolling mist, a strange scene arose. Before him, in a vast plain, he saw all the countries of the world, Europe, Asia, Africa, and America. And that's pretty much what they saw on the map at that particular time. He saw the Atlantic rolling and tossing between Europe and America, as well as the Pacific Ocean between the Americas and Asia. Again, the strange voice said, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." At that moment, he beheld a dark, shadowy being, like an angel, floating above the Atlantic between Europe and America. The strange being dipped its hands into the murky waters, and with the right hand sprinkled it upon America, then with his left on Europe. Immediately a cloud rose from the countries to join in the Atlantic. After staying stationary for a while, the cloud moved west to cover America. Through flashes of lightning, cries and smothered groans rose from the American people. A second angel appeared, repeating the first one's actions, dipping its hand into the ocean and sprinkling it upon America. The clouds then retreated to the sea. A third time, the mysterious voice saying, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." Towns and cities began to spring up across the land until the whole country was covered coast to coast. This first peril is often interpreted by many as the War of Independence. Now I'm going to get into the second great peril that the angel talked about. Again he heard the mysterious voice say, "Son of the Republic, the end of the century cometh. Look and learn." At this, the dark, shadowy angel turned its gaze southwardly, and from Africa he saw an ill-omened specter approaching America. It settled throughout the nation, in which the inhabitants set forth against each other. As he continued looking, he saw a bright angel with a crown of light that read, "Union." The angel placed the American flag between the divided nation and said, "Remember, ye are brethren." And the fighting stopped. Weapons dropped, and all became friends again and united around the national standard. The second peril is most likely the Civil War. Okay, and now this is the third peril and the most horrific peril. Again, the voice said, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." At this, the dark, shadowy angel put a trumpet to its mouth and blew 3 distinct blasts. Taking water from the ocean, he sprinkled it upon the lands of Europe, Asia, and Africa. A terrifying scene arose as thick black clouds rose up from the nations and joined as one. Pierced periodically with dark red lights, Washington began to see a massive array of armed troops headed out across the sea to America through the thickening darkness. Witnessing dimly lit armies devastating the American country with the sound of cannons and clashing of swords, again the angel said, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." When the voice ceased, the dark, shadowy angel put the trumpet to its mouth and blew a long and fearful blast. Now here's where heaven intervenes. Instantly, the light of 1,000 suns pierced the darkness and broke the clouds into fragments. In the same moment, the angel who had the word Union written upon its crown and who held our flag in one hand and a sword in the other, descended from heaven with legions of bright spirits. They joined with the worn and beaten down Americans, reviving them once again to take up their weapons and courageously defend the Republic. Through the noise of battle, yet again the angel's voice said, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." As the voice ceased, the dark, shadowy angel took up the waters of the ocean once more and sprinkled it upon America. Instantly, the cloud rolled back, taking its inhabitants with it, and leaving America victorious once again. Once more he beheld the villages, towns, and cities springing up where he had seen them before. In the same moment, the bright angel proclaimed in a loud voice, "While the stars remain and the heavens send down dew upon the earth, so long shall the Union last. Then, taking the crown from his head, which blazoned the word Union, he placed it upon the standard, while the people knelt and said, Amen. The scene instantly faded as the mist Washington first beheld settled on the room. Finding himself gazing at his original visitor, the angel addressed him once more. Son of the Republic, what you have seen is thus interpreted. 3 great perils will come upon the Republic. The most fearful is the third. But in this greatest conflict, the whole world united shall not prevail against her. Let every child of the Republic learn to live for his God, his land, and the Union. With these words, the vision vanished, and George Washington felt he had seen the birth, progress, and destiny of the United States of America. I'm just going to add a little thing in there. We are going through so much right now. The biggest thing that we have to find within ourselves, I believe, is union. We have to come together. We have to stand for what is right in the United States of America. And that is what I got from what George Washington's vision was. We, the United States of America, are the sons and daughters of the Republic, destined to spread this message of unity worldwide. And that's the reason George made it as the #1 guy on the Apocalypse time machine. President Abraham Lincoln. President Abraham Lincoln was the first president to institute a wartime status, habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is a writ that a person may seek from a court to obtain immediate release from unlawful confinement, as when the confinement occurred through a means that violated the person's constitutional rights. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus throughout the nation. Anyone rebelling against the U.S. would be jailed, denied jury trial, and tried in a military court instead. Many people do not know this fact about the Civil War. Abe Lincoln used the U.S. military to save the U.S. Republic from a domestic insurrection. Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution states that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion of the public safety that may require it. This clause, called the suspension clause, has only been instigated 4 times in U.S. history. A little while ago, Jack Smith, the dirty two-faced lawyer that is responsible for bringing up charges for the January 6th so-called insurrection, hit the headlines with the statement that he is charging Trump with Civil War-era rights violations. Strange coincidence? It's probably not. On September 12, 2018, 2 years before Let's Go Brandon stole the United States election, President Trump signed Executive Order 13848 into action, which is imposing certain sanctions in the event of foreign interference in a United States election. That's a strange coincidence, just because could President Trump have known that far behind that the election would be stolen? Yeah, probably, if he was a time traveler. Washington, D.C. operates as its own country. For those of you who are unaware of this, the United States is set up as this foreign country's corporation, where we are considered chattel, which by definition is property or slaves of this corporation. Order 13848 specifically sanctioned the foreign-owned bankrupt corporation operating out of the District of Columbia, which is Washington, D.C., that was sold out by changing the wording of the Constitution in 1871. In a smooth move set up to prevent us from going bankrupt after the Revolutionary War debt fell due, England bought the copyrights to the wording. The U.S., the USA, the United States of America, as well as the original Constitution, are or were owned by the Bank of England. Being that this move made the United States a corporation and not a country, this then defined it as a false entity. Since false entities can only operate with other false entities as defined in the Black's Law Dictionary, we are set up from birth with a sale of a separate entity known as our straw man. Our birth certificate is the legal sale of this entity that allows for an estimated worth over our lifetime to be traded on the stock market. So if you didn't get that, basically you're sold out from birth, and they are able to trade you on the stock market as a slave. It's sick. I don't know. The military has been in charge since January 20th, 2020, when Trump left the White House, believe it or not. Fake Biden is the president of a corrupt and bankrupt corporation and is not our president. He received a military funeral service. I went over this in the first video. Not an inauguration ceremony. Ask anyone in the military what all the show that day was about. If they know their stuff, they'll be able to tell you this. President Lincoln had his own plan in motion to stop the banks from criminal actions that were turning American citizens into slaves at the time. In order to prevent the greenback dollars that President Lincoln issued directly from the U.S. Treasury Department, President Lincoln was assassinated. The bank of that day was then able to collect interest on the currency. Biggest 5D chess game ever. In Q Drop 22, dated November 22nd, 2017, the questions were asked. Who controls the NG, which is the National Guard? You can answer these questions yourself. Why was the National Guard recently activated in select cities within the United States? Can the National Guard work in coordination with the Marines? Do conditions need to be satisfied to authorize? What former president used the military to save the Republic, and what occurred exactly? We find the answers in studying Lincoln. Is time travel possible? This is why Lincoln holds a gear on the time machine. President Ronald Reagan was very much a people's president. Known for being very personable, he once met a woman confused by what she thought was an invitation to the White House. When she showed up, rather than dismiss her, he instructed the guards to let her in, give her a tour, and then met her outside his office, saying that if he'd known she was coming, he would have come out to meet her himself. Imagine her surprise and how special she must have felt. This is also a well-known trait of President Trump. He was the first president to coin the phrase, "Make America Great Again." President Reagan had inherited a democratic nightmare after the Jimmy Carter days, including a failing economy, stagnant economic growth, and a runaway inflation coined by critics as stagflation, as well as skyrocketing taxes. Sounds familiar. However, one of the biggest challenges Reagan was facing was the Cold War. Threats of nuclear destruction from the Soviet Union had students diving under their desks and perpetual fear-driven classroom drills to avoid being blown up. Ronald Reagan was well known for his ability to carry the hearts of the American people through his ability to speak. His speeches were not only compelling and motivational, they were informative. When comparing ideologies of the West to the communist rule of Mikhail Gorbachev's evil empire, Reagan didn't assume the American people were well versed on the policies of communism. He explained them. With his personable and humorous fashion, he was able not only to convince the Soviet Union to abolish their own bad society, he actually convinced them to agree with this description of being an evil empire. Reagan was able to win the hearts of his adversaries with the act of simply speaking to them in a manner that they weren't used to. Instead of being all about business, Reagan's charm and sense of humor gained the trust of our enemies, allowing them to make their own decisions to comply with his ideologies. In another of his famous speeches, influencing the destruction of the Berlin Wall, one simple quote echoes through from 1987. "Mr. Gorbachev, take down that wall." Although the focus of the Cold War and the ending of the Soviet rule was a huge accomplishment, Reagan fighting this kind of external battle against an external adversary was not his only focus. Reagan had a single ideological adversary that he was against that could be summed up in one word: collectivism. This is the idea that the collective of the people, usually under the supervision of a government, owns and controls the means of production and distribution by the people. It's the opposite of individualism and has run rampant in today's society. We see the effects in the corporate measures taken so boldly when the government declared a common cold, renamed COVID-19, a national emergency, and shut down all small business owners, leaving the corporate giants to devour our diverse business infrastructure. It's the idea that the state dominates the family, the church, education, and industry. Might as well add wiping your ass to that with a deliberate shortage of toilet paper. Just think of the now infamous Klaus Schwab phrase, "You will own nothing and will be happy, and you'll eat bugs too." Bullshit. In the early part of the 20th century, communism, fascism, progressivism reared their ugly heads with doctrines that defied the collective, oppressing the very people that were tricked into thinking this was just democracy. When Reagan entered the Oval Office, collectivism was making gain upon gain, and the Republican Party was in complete retreat. Reagan set his goal at defeating collectivism not only abroad with the Soviet Union, but with domestic interference of big government. One of his most famous quotes, "The most terrifying words in the English language are, 'I'm from the government, and I'm here to help,' are hilarious and true to this day." Clare Boothe Luce, a great American diplomat, once said that every president would be remembered in one line. Washington was our founding father. Lincoln abolished slavery. Reagan could be remembered by winning the Cold War without firing a shot. But like all presidents, and just people in general, there's always so much more to the story. Ronald Reagan also restored the American economy and the American spirit. He was against the collectivism that is being shoved down our throats once again by big government control, big corporate control, and the threat of the New World Order. Americans and people worldwide are once again recognizing the importance of everyone's voices as individuals, not as a collective, but in the respect of every person's rights to be who they are, that can only be forthcoming in a decentralized republic. In the painting, the placement of Reagan started out where Andrew Jackson is. God kept urging me to move him to the corner slot. Perhaps this was because Reagan was cornered when his life was threatened with the scare of a gunshot assassination. Perhaps the order of the presidents had to be in correct succession around the time machine. After all, it is a time machine. I don't know personally, but God does. So maybe he'll tell you. Let me know if he does. President John F. Kennedy. President John F. Kennedy was another of America's sweetheart presidents. He was a devout man of deep passion and commitment for our country. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, is one of many famous quotes this president brings to mind. Many believe it was his threats to take down the secret societies and undercover agents that plague our country to this day that inspired his assassination. We are just now uncovering heinous acts committed by our own government institutions such as the FBI, CIA, and Homeland Security, and connecting the entity of secret societies known as the Illuminati or Freemasonry. Just as any infiltration of parasites, good men and women have served, and this is certainly not discounting their efforts. But as we learn of their accomplishments, there is an overwhelming consensus to scatter these agencies to the wind. Gematria is the study of numbers. Numbers add up in spelling like this: A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, etc. President Kennedy was the 35th president. President Trump was the 45th president. 3 plus 5 equals 8, and 4 plus 5 equals 9. Unity, the name of the angel who visited Washington in his vision of America's future, adds up to 89. In Gematria, 8 plus 9 equals 17. The 17th letter of the alphabet is Q. There are no coincidences. On October 5th, 2017, 23 days before the Q board was activated, President Donald J. Trump stood at the center of the room. He was surrounded by military leaders and their spouses. He baffled the press with what he said. His words spoken were reminiscent of President Kennedy. In President Kennedy's book, JFK Beyond the White House, Part 1, Chapter 7, 1/7, is called The Calm Before the Storm. This was written 62 years ago in 1961. 22 years before President Trump's presidency ended in 2021, on July 16, 1999, John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. We were told both John F. Kennedy and his son died. Or did they? There's a swimming suspicion that both survived, along with JFK Jr.'s beautiful wife, Carolyn. Inside the time machine, there is a serene painting of one of Trump's golf courses. Not knowing which of the courses may happen to be his favorite, a scenic picture from the Miami course fit really nicely. JFK Jr.'s plane is flying over the course, watching from somewhere in time as his father's legacy is being fulfilled. President Kennedy was the father of many impressionable quotes. I picked out some of the quotes that surpassed the test of time, seeming to add placement to his involvement on the time machine. Change is the law of life, and those who look at the past or present are certain to miss the future. To state the facts frankly is not to despair the future nor indict the past. The prudent heir takes careful inventory of his legacies and gives faithful accounting to those who he owes an obligation of trust. And my favorite, if art is to nourish the roots of our culture, society must set the artist free to follow his vision wherever it takes him. Okay, then we're going to go on to President Andrew Jackson. President Andrew Jackson was both loved and reviled. Loved by patriots and hated by the deep state early contributors is my best guess. The 7th President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, was born in South Carolina on March 15th, 1767. He was barely 10 years old when the American Revolution broke out. The war claimed the lives of his 2 brothers and his mother, leaving Jackson with a bitter hatred of the British. In 1788, after a brief study of the law, he became a district attorney in Tennessee, then known as the Southwest Territories. Though he had no formal military training, he earned the rank of Major General of the Tennessee Militia. By way of dynamic persona and his ability as a natural-born leader, Jackson was a badass. He fought in many duels, even killing a famous attorney and duelist, Charles Dickinson, in one. As Jackson's military career picked up, so did his interest in politics. He served in Congress in 1796 when Tennessee became the state, and later as a senator. He believed that owning land was the only real wealth in that industry. Banking and commerce were financial traps that ultimately benefited the rich and no one else. Smart man. In 1812, a new war broke out between the U.S. and Great Britain. The conflict was a disaster in most every respect for the ill-prepared Americans, but it ended up on a high note thanks to Jackson. Sporting his nickname Old Hickory, Hickory being a notoriously hard wood, and commanding a hastily assembled army at New Orleans, Jackson won a terrific victory in 1815. This victory put Jackson in the limelight, enabling a shining reputation and a stellar chance for presidency. In 1824, his opponents were Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams. Andrew Jackson won the popular vote, but believed he was cheated out of this win. Even though he won the popular vote, he did not secure the vote in the Electoral College. And according to the Constitution, the election decision then went to the House of Representatives. They voted in John Quincy Adams, with the decision hanging on Henry Clay. And Jackson, claiming this to be a collusion between the two, vowed to run again. In the election of 1828, he beat Adams by a landslide. Doesn't this sound familiar? When Trump became president, he hung a portrait of Jackson in the Oval Office, later losing, quote, losing, unquote, his re-election to Biden's 81 million votes. It's unbelievable. In Joe Biden's infamous words on October 25th, 2020, the Let's Go Brandon stated that his campaign has put together the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in American political history. This may very well be the only true statement out of that mouth since. Trump must have known that following the footsteps of Jackson was his destiny. Just like Jackson, He knew that the people needed to experience the wrath of this failed excuse of a human being, and that the only route back to his presidency would be to win the hearts of Americans, allowing the swamp-controlled demon rats to continue their devious plan. When someone is under the control of a cult, and you take them out of the cult, they most often want to return to the cult, because that's what they believe. The brainwashing that has gone on for so long with the help of mainstream media and Hollywood-planted propaganda planted us in this situation as a country. The people needed to see and experience the nasty plan of the deep state firsthand. As uncomfortable as it has been, we the people are the ones who needed a swift kick in the butt to wake the entire country up to what has been in the works for centuries. In Trump's address to Andrew Jackson's heritage in May 2017, he expressed his admiration for Jackson's accomplishments, stating that it was during the revolution that Jackson first confronted and defied an arrogant elite. And smiling, he continued, "Does that sound familiar to you?" In his presidency, Andrew Jackson would prove to be a pivotal gear in the sands of time. When the National Bank came up for recharter in 1832, he vetoed it. Jackson didn't trust bankers. He insisted that America's assets should be distributed in national institutions throughout the United States and not in one central location. A true patriot, Jackson believed in the power of the people, not in the compartmentalization that corporations and government-run secret spy organizations rely on to trick the people into doing what they want, increasing the power of the few. Between the presidential gears, there is a reflection that's going on outside the view of the painting. The reflection of the steampunk Punisher's weapon reveals that he is using the Bible as his weapon. The Bible is turned to the chapter of John, bearing in mind that everything in this painting was put there because I felt led to put it there. Some things I comprehended why they were there, and some things I didn't. The research is coming now, after the painting is finished. I felt led to make some sort of ray gun that gathered its energy from the Bible. And from what it looks like, it's the first chapter of John. To be honest, I didn't know what it said. This is crazy cool. John 1, 1 through 5 reads, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came to be through him, and without him nothing came to be. What came to be through him was life, and this life was the light of the human race, the light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Amazing. We are in the battle of all battles, the one talked about in the Bible, the battle for your human soul, the light of the human race, and the darkness has not overcome it. Underneath Jackson, on President Trump's left side, the angels are coming, dressed in full armor and ready to clear the space for man that is just a short distance away, seen coming up in the reflection over Trump's right shoulder. Jesus is on his way. It's an honor and a pleasure to paint with God. Inside the time machine, a wall of water separates the realities. This was a feature inspired by the many Hollywood movies made about stargates and portals. But most fascinatingly, there are a large group of whistleblowers that claim they have used jump rooms to traverse through portals into different times and realities. They say portals aren't round, they're more door-shaped, but this is the land of steampunk, where circles and curves are so much more sexy. Water is also well known for holding memory. Experiments using a petri dish and pictures presented to the water for a period of time and then frozen will produce beautiful images of the very same picture. Research has been so amazing in just this arena alone. Water is able to capture not only pictures shown to it, but thoughts, dreams, and visions. Incredible experiment that you can try at home. The checkerboard floor. The checkerboard is one of the symbols used by Freemasons in ritualistic ceremonies. Artwork and important architecture that is usually used for decision making, such as government buildings, courtrooms, and churches. Using black and white in this fashion has become a symbol of duality, or the base of consciousness. Base consciousness is important because it is where all other states of mind arise. Taking a quote from Dr. Strange, at the base of consciousness, mind meets matter. Thoughts fuel the universe. This is the ideology of an architect or creator. What's really mind-blowing about this bit of information is that the pictures taken in particle accelerators of protons made up of neutrons look exactly like checkerboards of light. Neutrinos, being the smallest form of energy, possibly like a thought form, stack up, and gaining a charge, perhaps an action, or the excitement within a thought. This then makes up the neutrino field or an energy packet, which then makes our little friend, the proton. Given this interesting bit of reality, it certainly would make sense that the use of the checkerboard floor inside secret societies and large decision-making facilities could be intended to change the fabric of our reality on a larger scale. The checkerboard floor represents duality, but also the knowledge of good and evil. Going back to the garden, having eaten the forbidden fruit and becoming like God may also be inside the intention. In the painting, this version of reality is warping and swirling into a vortex taken out by the hole-in-one that Trump made. I made sure that the golf ball's brand name was visible. Trump won. Because he did.